Pushpin 5 Keynotes for scientists may have found proof of a parallel universe. Milky Way. 1. The Antarctic anomaly. Scientists detect strange, impossible particles emerging from deep within Antarctica, particles that shouldn't exist in our universe, moving backward in time. This discovery hints at the presence of an alternate reality overlapping with our own. 2. The vanishing researchers. As the investigation deepens, key scientists involved in the research mysteriously disappear. Their notes suggest they may have uncovered more than just theoretical proof, perhaps even a doorway to the other side. 3. The mirror world phenomenon. Strange reports begin surfacing worldwide, people seeing reflections that move independently, experiencing déjà vu on an extreme level, and even encountering alternate versions of themselves. Reality itself seems to be shifting. 4. The experiment that went too far. The last remaining scientists, desperate to understand what's happening, attempt to recreate the anomaly in a controlled environment. But when they activate their device, the world around them begins to fracture, revealing glimpses of another Earth. 5. The collision of realities. The final revelation: our universe and a parallel one are on a collision course, and if they fully merge, neither will survive. The surviving scientists must decide: shut down the experiment and seal the breach, or risk stepping through to the unknown before everything collapses. Milky Way Sci-Fi Story Intro. Scientists may have found proof of a parallel universe. The first sign was a whisper in the static. At first, scientists thought it was just noise, some random interference picked up by high-altitude weather balloons in Antarctica. But then, the anomaly repeated. Again. And again. A signal, buried in radiation, pulsing with an unsettling rhythm, as if something or someone was trying to be heard. Then came the particles. Neutrinos, ghostly, near massless particles that normally pass through everything, undisturbed, began behaving in ways that defied known physics. Instead of moving in predictable paths, these particles were appearing out of nowhere, traveling backward through time, breaking the fundamental laws of our universe. At the Carlston Research Station in Antarctica, Dr. Elise Warren was the first to put the pieces together. "This isn't just an anomaly," she whispered, staring at the data on her screen. "It's proof. Proof of another universe." The implications were terrifying. If particles could seep through, what else could? Or worse, what if something was already trying to get in? Then the disappearances started. Dr. Miguel Carter vanished first, gone without a trace, his workstation left exactly as he had last used it, his coffee still warm. The next morning, Dr. Patel followed. No one saw her leave. No security footage showed her departure. But on her desk, scrawled in shaky handwriting, was a single phrase: "They're watching." As the anomalies escalated, the team uncovered something even more chilling: images and recordings that shouldn't exist. Faces appeared in security feeds, distorted reflections of the missing scientists, looking out from the wrong side of the mirror. And then the breach opened. It wasn't a doorway, not exactly. More like a rupture, a thinning of reality itself. Through the shimmering rift, glimpses of an Earth just like ours flickered, only different. Shadows moved where they shouldn't, buildings stood where none existed. And in the distance, something was staring back. The team had two choices: seal the breach and risk losing the greatest scientific discovery of all time, or step through and see what lay beyond. They didn't realize until it was too late. The other side was already coming for them. The first indication that something was wrong came from a high-altitude neutrino detection balloon floating over Antarctica. It was supposed to measure cosmic rays entering Earth's atmosphere, detecting the ghostly, near-massless particles known as neutrinos. These particles usually travel in a straight line, rarely interacting with matter. However, what the Antarctic research team observed was something that defied known physics. Neutrinos were not just appearing out of nowhere, but they were moving in reverse, as if traveling backward through time. At first, the scientists dismissed it as an error, a calibration issue with their equipment. Dr. Elise Warren, the lead researcher at the Charleston Research Station, ordered a full system diagnostic. Everything checked out. The sensors were functioning perfectly. Yet the anomaly persisted. Neutrinos weren't just behaving abnormally, they were originating from the ground from deep beneath Antarctica's ice when they should have been coming from outer space. It was as if these particles were emerging from another universe, one that overlapped with our own but followed different physical laws. The team rechecked the data against other global neutrino observations. No similar phenomenon had ever been recorded. This was unprecedented. Warren and her colleagues attempted to model possible explanations: unknown quantum effects, a hidden underground particle accelerator which was absurd given the remoteness of the Antarctic region, or even some unknown property of the ice itself. But none of these explanations made sense. Then, Dr. Miguel Carter proposed a terrifying possibility. What if these neutrinos aren't from our universe, he said, leaning over a screen filled with erratic particle trajectories. What if they're bleeding through from somewhere else? The idea was radical. The concept of parallel universes had long been a theoretical discussion in physics, explored in quantum mechanics and the many worlds interpretation. But no one had ever observed tangible evidence of another reality interacting with our own, yet here it was: particles behaving as if they originated from a place where time itself moved differently. Things took an even stranger turn when the anomalies became more frequent. Over the next few weeks, more unusual detections were recorded: not just neutrinos, but other unexplained signals. Strange, rhythmic pulses hidden in background radiation. Irregular fluctuations in electromagnetic fields. Instruments picking up faint, distorted echoes that resembled human speech but not in any recognizable language. The scientific community was divided. Some dismissed the findings as misinterpretations, but others recognized the magnitude of the discovery. If this was real, it meant that our universe was not alone. The final, chilling confirmation came when the station's deep penetration radar, which normally mapped the dense ice layers, picked up something impossible: a fluctuating structure beneath the ice, emitting weak but consistent energy signatures. It wasn't natural. It wasn't from Earth. And the deeper they looked, the clearer it became: something had been buried there for a very long time. Dr. Miguel Carter was the first to vanish. The disappearance sent shockwaves through the Charleston Research Station. One moment, he was in the lab analyzing the latest neutrino data, and the next, he was gone without a trace. His workstation was left exactly as it had been, his notes scrawled in messy handwriting across his tablet. His coffee sat on the desk, still warm. There were no footprints leading out of the station, no signs of a struggle. The security footage was even more unsettling. It showed Miguel working at his desk, but then, at precisely 3:13 a.m., the screen flickered, distorted for a split second, and when it stabilized, he was no longer there. At first, the team assumed a malfunction with the cameras. But the deeper they looked, the more unsettling the evidence became. Other recordings from around the station had similar flickers at the exact same moment, almost as if reality itself had glitched. Dr. Elise Warren, now heading the research after Miguel's disappearance, was shaken. She had known him for years. He was not the kind of person to simply walk away from his work. His disappearance wasn't an accident, and she knew it was somehow connected to the anomalies they were studying. Then, 3 days later, Dr. Anaya Patel vanished too. Her disappearance was eerily similar. No struggle. No sign of departure. No recorded footage of her leaving. But this time, she left something behind, a note, hastily scribbled on a torn piece of paper, found tucked into her research journal. They're watching. They're learning. The reflections aren't reflections anymore. The words sent chills through the remaining scientists. What did she mean? What reflections? Elise thought back to the recent strange reports, researchers claiming they saw their reflections move slightly out of sync in mirrors, in glass panels, even in the icy surfaces outside. At first, they had laughed it off as exhaustion, tricks of the mind. But now, with 2 missing team members, it didn't seem so funny anymore. The tension in the station grew. Conversations became hushed, paranoia seeped into every interaction. No one wanted to be alone. Some of the researchers suggested calling for evacuation, but Elise hesitated. If they left now, they might never find out what happened to Miguel and Anaya. Then, on the 7th night, something new happened. Elise awoke to a faint whispering sound. It was barely audible, almost like wind moving through the station, but there was no wind outside. It came from the hallway. Gripping a flashlight, she stepped out of her quarters, heart pounding. The station was eerily silent, the emergency lights casting a dim glow across the metal floors. Then she saw it. A figure standing at the far end of the corridor. It looked exactly like Miguel. But something was wrong. His face was pale, his expression vacant. And his reflection, cast on the frosted glass window beside him, wasn't the same as his real body. Then, in a voice that wasn't quite his, he spoke. "You're not supposed to be here." The first official report of the mirror world phenomenon came from Dr. Lillian Cho, a physicist specializing in quantum anomalies. She had been working late, reviewing footage of the Antarctic neutrino detections, when she noticed something strange. It was a small detail, something she could have easily dismissed as exhaustion playing tricks on her mind. But it wasn't. The reflection of her lab in the large observation window didn't match reality. At first, it seemed like a simple misalignment, perhaps a trick of the lighting or the curvature of the glass. But when she moved her hand across her desk, she saw it clear as day. Her reflection hesitated before mimicking her. Lillian froze, her pulse hammering in her ears. She slowly lifted her right hand, and a full second later, the reflection did the same. She turned her head, and in the glass, her reflection turned the other way. A shiver ran down her spine. She shut her laptop and tried to dismiss it as stress. But as she stepped into the hallway, she passed another reflective surface, a polished steel cabinet, and saw it happen again. This time, her reflection wasn't just lagging. It was watching. By morning, others in the station started reporting the same eerie occurrences. At first, it was subtle, just an odd flicker in the glass, a strange delay in reflections, an occasional distortion in mirrored surfaces. But then, it escalated. Dr. Ramirez swore he saw his reflection smile at him when he wasn't smiling. Dr. Jensen reported that he turned away from a mirror, only to glance back and find that his reflection hadn't moved. The tension in the station grew unbearable. People started covering mirrors, avoiding their own reflections, dreading the moment they would catch something wrong in the glass. Then came the déjà vu episodes. Researchers began experiencing strange memory lapses, walking into rooms they didn't remember entering, finding their belongings misplaced, recalling conversations that never happened. It was as if they were overlapping with another version of themselves from a slightly different timeline. Some even claimed they saw alternate versions of their own handwriting in their journals, as if someone or something had written notes in their place. And then there were the encounters. Dr. Elise Warren, already shaken by the disappearances of her colleagues, had her own terrifying experience one evening when she caught movement in the reflection of a darkened lab window. At first, she thought it was another scientist, but as she turned, she realized the room behind her was empty. But the reflection still showed a person standing there. A perfect copy of her own form. But it wasn't her. The reflected version of Elise stood motionless, staring at her with dark, hollow eyes. Its lips parted in a whisper that sent a cold shiver through her bones. "You don't belong here." Then, in an instant, the reflection was gone. And Elise was left standing there, heart pounding, realizing one horrifying truth. Something from the other side was trying to break through. The team at Carlston Research Station knew they were running out of time. With 2 scientists missing, reflections behaving unnaturally, and an increasing number of strange anomalies, something was happening. Something beyond their understanding. Dr. Elise Warren, now leading the remaining team members, made a desperate decision: they needed to replicate the anomaly under controlled conditions. If they could recreate the event that caused the strange neutrino detections, maybe they could understand what was happening before it was too late. The plan was risky. Using the station's experimental particle collider, a low-energy neutrino detector designed to study cosmic radiation, they would attempt to generate a controlled resonance field, mimicking the same energy signature detected from beneath the Antarctic ice. The hope was that it would either confirm their parallel universe theory or at least explain the distortions in reality they were experiencing. At precisely 11:23 p.m., the team activated the experiment. The collider hummed to life, deep beneath the icy surface, sending pulses of energy through the frozen landscape. The station lights flickered as the sensors picked up something strange: anomalous readings in the electromagnetic field, distortions in gravitational data. And then, the world shifted. For a brief moment, everything doubled. Elise saw her team standing around her, but at the same time, she saw other versions of them flickering like ghostly images, slightly out of sync. She could feel it, as if 2 realities were pressing against each other, overlapping for the briefest second. Then, the station lost power. Total darkness. Emergency lights kicked in, casting a dim red glow through the corridors. Equipment sparked, alarms blared, and the radio communication filled with static. And then, the screaming started. Dr. Lillian Cho was the first to cry out. She had been staring into one of the reflective panels monitoring the energy output when something inside the glass grabbed her. Her colleagues rushed to pull her back, but she was being dragged into the reflection, her limbs distorting as if she were sinking into liquid. With one final, terrified gasp, she vanished, pulled into the mirror world. The team fell into chaos. Some tried shutting down the collider, but the system controls were unresponsive. The machine was still active, its energy readings spiking to impossible levels. Then, a voice echoed through the station. It wasn't coming from the radio. It wasn't coming from any speaker. It was coming from every reflective surface at once. "You've opened the door." Elise turned toward the nearest window and saw them figures standing in the glass, watching. Not just reflections, but other versions of her team. Twisted, distorted, their eyes black voids of emptiness. And as the glass began to crack, Elise realized the horrifying truth. They had gone too far. And now, the other side was coming through. The glass shattered. It wasn't just a physical break, it was as if reality itself fractured. The mirrors, the windows, the polished metal surfaces across the Carlston Research Station all exploded outward in a violent cascade of shards. But instead of scattering across the floor, the fragments hung in midair, suspended, vibrating as if caught between two opposing forces. And then they stepped through. The figures from the reflections, distorted versions of the research team, emerged from the broken surfaces, moving unnaturally, their limbs jerking as if they were adjusting to new physics. Their eyes were wrong. Too black, too empty, too hungry. Dr. Elise Warren stumbled backward, heart pounding. One of the doppelgangers turned to her, her own face staring back, but not quite right. Its head twitched, its mouth forming a grotesque smile that stretched too wide. "You were never supposed to see us." The lights flickered, and in the momentary darkness, something cold brushed against Elise's skin. A presence, something alien yet familiar, like static crawling through her nerves. When the emergency lights flickered back on, the figures had moved closer. One of them, Dr. Miguel Carter's doppelganger, reached out toward the real Dr. Patel. Before she could react, he gripped her wrist. She screamed, her body convulsed as if being rewritten from the inside out. Her reflection in a nearby shard of glass twisted, its expression warping independently of her real face. Then, without warning, she was yanked backward, disappearing into the fragmented surface. She was gone. Elise barely had time to react before more of them advanced. The remaining scientists ran, dodging through the dim corridors, the walls flickering with echoes, shadows of themselves just slightly out of sync, like a lagging video feed. They weren't just being chased. Reality itself was breaking down. Dr. Ramirez tried to reach the power controls to shut down the collider, but his reflection reached it first. The console flared with an eerie, unnatural glow as the doppelganger touched it, its fingers sinking into the controls like they were liquid. The station groaned, metal straining under forces it was never meant to endure. Elise knew they had one last chance. They couldn't stop the anomaly, not anymore. But maybe they could contain it. She shouted for everyone to fall back to the emergency override system, a last resort function meant to collapse the underground lab in case of radiation breaches. If they could cut off the energy feeding the rift, maybe, just maybe, they could sever the connection between their world and the mirror world. The doppelgangers screamed as Elise slammed her hand onto the override. A pulse of energy ripped through the station. The reflections shattered like glass, their forms dissolving into nothingness as the rift collapsed. The station trembled, metal shrieking, and for a moment, Elise thought she had made a mistake, that she had doomed them all. Then, silence. The lights flickered. The glass fragments fell, lifeless. The distorted echoes were gone. But something was still wrong. As Elise caught her breath, she turned to her remaining team members, Dr. Ramirez, Dr. Jensen, and two others. Relief flooded her, until she saw it. Their reflections had not returned. The mirrors remained empty.